Hello, everyone, and welcome to Your Freedom Hubs presents Free Market Cash Patient. And I'm your host, Jeff Cantor, along with my co-host, Charles Froman. We are sponsored by Your Freedom Hub, where all the disruptors tend to unite. And tonight we're going to have some really interesting conversation because there's a lot of stuff that we're paying attention to in this unique little world we're sitting in with the COVID situation, and kind of what was the world before and what's going to become the world after, and what's going to happen internationally is going to be an interesting twist to all of this as well. So pretty excited about that. Now, this is going to be recorded and will be available on our 3 different channels. So we're up on BitChute, Brighteon, or YouTube. So whichever one you prefer, we're there for you. Just remember these links are case sensitive, so make sure you get them the right font size. And then also, just as I indicated, this is sponsored by Your Freedom Hub. There's the landing page. And then also, more importantly, here is the Brighteon page. So here's where you're going to see, we were talking a minute ago about doing some yoga. That was an episode from a few episodes back. And a variety of other topics, very, very complete information on all of these, and a lot of very unique topics to be sure. And tonight's going to be no exception. So why don't we get into a little bit about that here tonight? And I'm going to have Charles give us a little rundown on who's here visiting today.
Thank you, Jeff, and welcome, Christina. Very excited to have this topic, medical tourism, presented tonight. We did have earlier this year David Vequist, a professor in Santa Fe, present the general topic as the market has grown where patients travel not only overseas for cheaper and sometimes better health care and specialties and surgeries, but even outside your local region, across the state, to another state, to a lot of these surgical centers that really disclose prices. And what got Jeff and me interested in this really is our profession, which is a sponsor of our weekly webinar at Health Excellence Plus, because Forbes magazine featured us for creating cash shopping patients. And when you're paying cash, you're no longer handcuffed by insurance networks. You can go wherever you want, including worldwide. So that opening of the market worldwide has, led us and forced us to really educate ourselves about this market, to find its gaps. And speaking of gaps, we met Christina de Moraes via LinkedIn, and we had some great conversations. And she really has this neat idea from her experience organizing trips for patients overseas and handling their entire experience with the local doctors and hospitals, recovery, travel, everything. Because you really got to have your hand held if you're going to really go outside your comfort zone and explore these great opportunities and deals overseas. So she is organizing a Chamber of Commerce for medical tourism. She's calling it the IMTCC, the International Medical Tourism Chamber of Commerce. So we are excited, Jeff, to hear Christina talk about that organization. And, we could have canceled this event because, the COVID lockdown has shut down international business to a large degree, except for essential business that hasn't stopped and in some cases has grown worldwide. But it's even locally at your hospital, you can't get elective surgeries or procedures. It's all COVID. So, but that doesn't stop people from needing non-COVID treatments locally. Yeah. And so there is a current market for tourism, maybe not so international, but also this hibernation, this pause in the market as the recession kind of hurts all of us, is a good time to plan for how we're going to emerge from this troubling experience stronger than ever. So I see this as a great opportunity to explore this huge and growing and wonderful industry, handcuffed a bit by the recession, to see where we go from here, Jeff.
Very good, and very true, because there's always a lot of opportunity with adversity. So this could be a little silver lining for them. So let's see what Christina has to say on that topic. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you take control.
So, as Jeff and Charles said, International Medical Tourism Chamber of Commerce, and they asked me to do this around this whole COVID thing. And kind of just started thinking, what is medical tourism and healthcare going to look like post-COVID? Um, For us in medical tourism, there's been a lot of kind of doom and gloom. As you mentioned, everything is just COVID now, and because there's
Christina,
yes.
let me interject one second. For everybody's benefit, why don't you set up what's been going on in medical tourism real quickly, as
I'm
opposed
going
to
to get
what's
in.
happening? Oh,
Yes,
okay, gotcha. All right.
that's
Sorry,
gonna just
didn't mean to
it's
step.
okay.
I just want you to go off into like today, and no one even totally understands how much
No,
tourism is
I'm gonna get
occurring.
into
And
that. Don't worry.
good. Okay, great.
Yeah, I just wanted to say there's a lot of doom and gloom, and everybody shut down, and so I got to thinking that both healthcare and medical tourism is at a standstill. Like I said, only things going on in hospitals right now is COVID related stuff. So as Jeff said, it's an opportunity just to kind of sit back and see what we might be able to do. And I think that medical tourism has some applicable lessons for healthcare as well. So that's where I'm going to go. And I'm going to start with the history of medical tourism. Basically, it started centuries ago. The Greeks and the Romans, they would travel to Syria and other locations where they either had, baths and sometimes, springs, hot water springs, and some kind of, treatments like that. And it was called Asclepios, is one of the first medical tourism destinations. Back then, it was also, yeah, Ville in France. Actually, the word spa comes from Sante I forgot it already. But anyways, it's been going on for a really long time. Developed some more with this ideas of sanitariums and then sanatoriums. So it's always about whether you're looking for health, you're looking for treatments, always about where can you get something that's either not available where you are, or it's available for a better price, or it's some kind of specialty or special person or professional that's not available where you're at. Of course, medical tourism now kind of switched over. Obviously, there's a lot of hospitals in the United States that deal with a lot of foreign patients. Nowadays, when medical tourism started to switch, it turned into people going for different reasons than way back in the day. So now it's more of the developed world going to parts of the undeveloped world in a lot of cases to get the procedures that they want. And most of the time now in medical tourism, um, oops, so today's medical tourism, yes. So medical tourism today is more about what Jeff and Charles talk about, free market consumerism. So looking for procedures, especially for us here in the North America area, we're looking for procedures that our insurance won't pay for, or we don't have insurance coverage at all and we need procedures or treatments. Um, Also, a lot of people go for, and different reasons too. Here in the United States, we pretty much think of going to some place that has something that we can't pay for here in the United States. It's more expensive, like dentistry is a big reason for people traveling to other locations, especially Mexico, Costa Rica, etc. And while in the East, for example, in Africa and things like that, there is not considered so much an elective procedure. A lot of there's not a lot of good hospital systems in places like that, so they are forced to travel to places like India, South Africa, things like this for treatments that just don't exist in their country. They either don't have the hospital infrastructure, sometimes they don't have good enough surgeons with enough experience, especially in some things like oncology and things like that. So the reasons kind of vary, depending on where you're from. But said it's been happening for a really long time. I think it's going to keep happening, and it's just a matter of why we're doing it. So nowadays on our side of the world here, the top 10 destinations for medical tourism, we have India, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, Taiwan. You see a lot over there is in the Asia area. here, Brazil, Korea, Costa Rica, Turkey, and Mexico. And they all kind of have their specialties. I said Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, they have a lot of plastic surgery that goes on there. India pretty much does a little bit of everything. Brazil, known for plastic surgery, of course. Turkey, they do plastic surgery. A lot of people in the UK, for example, with the EU, they have this cross-border healthcare directive that allows them to cross the border for healthcare that they need, and their, their, what is it, like globalized healthcare system there, they'll pay for it. So they've even encouraged it in Europe. Yes, why these destinations have developed over the time. Several reasons: government and private sector investment, broad commitment to international accreditation, and some semblance of quality of care. They have a large international patient flow. They're usually places that have a lot of tourism infrastructure. Big difference in the cost savings generally, political transparency and stability. Reputation for specialty excellence. As I mentioned, some destinations have already kind of carved out a niche for themselves. History of healthcare innovation and achievement, and availability of internationally trained doctors and experienced medical staff. Give you an idea of why people like to go somewhere else sometimes. This is a chart here that shows you some common surgeries have heart bypass, angioplasty, hip joint replacement, dental implants, lap band, facelift, and the prices in the USA is the first column. And all the way across there, you'll see quite a difference. Even the heart bypass right at the top, 144,000, and this is actually a few years old, this chart. Meanwhile, in Thailand, it's available at 24. Singapore, it's down to 13, and in India, you can get it for 8,500. Hip joint replacement, 50,000 here, 8,000 down in India. It's just, it's a huge difference. And I mean, it's nice to see the low prices, but that's not, that's not the only reason we go for medical tourism. But it definitely started as that. As we're mentioning, free market. If you can get the same, what you feel is the same quality and value, bang for your buck somewhere else, then why not? Especially when we have to pay for healthcare out of pocket. Look at my notes here. 1 second. Let's see. Before I move into how I got started, I just want to mention about the COVID thing too. That a lot of people are talking doom and gloom, and I tend to think a little more positive. For example, MERS and SARS were hospital infections at the time, and that didn't seem to have a negative output, so a negative impact on what we do. So one of the big questions I have, though, is when this is all over, is this going to be something that we see hospitals like after 2008, for example, when all that was left was big banks and things? Is this going to be something that gives individuals more of an opportunity to stand out, or we can look at the hospitals as the the champions for this? I like to think that it's a lot easier to build trust once again, person to person, more intimate than, for example, a big hospital system. And I also feel that the destinations that might have trouble, and even locally, I think it's going to be based on how well they responded to or reacted to the COVID virus. And as far as destinations, probably the destinations that didn't fare so well. So, for example, Italy right now is going through, having a lot of problems and having a lot of deaths, this kind of thing. So, probably destinations like that didn't seem to handle COVID well will probably, have a little harder time of developing that trust once again. So, all right, I'm going to tell you how I got started in medical tourism. Very interesting. I got started in medical tourism back in 2001. I was almost 300 pounds, as you can see. And I was in Brazil with my husband then at the time, and just having a difficult time. It's hot there, and it's humid, and we just gotten back from this awful trip to Rio where I had to walk up a bunch of stairs. Everybody walks there and get into buses that I couldn't even fit through the turnstiles on. And as we were coming home, we picked up a local paper, and it had a spread in there about a local surgeon that was doing weight loss surgery and talking about his patients and how well they were doing. So that kind of got me on my journey. I spent the next month there and holed up in my mother-in-law's back little office, researching everything I could about weight loss surgery and the different kind of procedures, etc. And I found out the procedure I wanted. This is when I started also to get involved in the online support groups and things, obesityhelp.com, Yahoo groups, etc. But found out that particular procedure I wanted might not be covered by my insurance, so that got me in contact with some Brazilian surgeons that were doing the procedure I wanted. And so I was already decided, if my insurance won't pay for it when I get home, I'm going to come back to Brazil and get it done here. And amazingly, the doctor spoke great English. He'd worked in like the Boston hospital or something like that. So that was my first foray into what is this thing for traveling. It really wasn't an industry yet. It wasn't recognized or anything like that, but that's how I got into that. And when uh, I came back to the United States. I had my surgery. Luckily, they did cover the procedure I wanted there. And I lost about 175 pounds 14 months post-op. My husband said, "We're going to move to Brazil." And I said, "That's great. I need a bunch of plastic surgery. So what better place to be than, the land of plastic surgery?" So I continued sharing my story online with my peers, and I shared my plastic surgery journey in Brazil. And I just literally had my peers say, "Oh my gosh, I need these procedures too. I can't believe how little you paid. Can't believe how awesome you look. I would absolutely come if I knew you were there and could hand hold me through the process, speak the language, hook me up with your doctor, etc." And so that's literally how I started. It was really a matter of taking a lot of responsibility for the patients, because you realize 85% of my patients had to get a passport for the very first time just to come to Brazil. So they were coming, putting their life in my hands, and to me that was something really, really important. Also, I was watching what was going on the online support groups and places. At the time, a lot of people were going to Costa Rica, a lot of people were going to Mexico, and there was just a lot of horror stories going on. And I said, okay, if I'm going to offer this kind of service, I want to make sure I'm doing it right. So paid a lot of attention to what was going wrong in those other places as I developed my own processes and protocols. And so my next venture, MedNet Brazil, is my first venture. Sorry, MedNet Brazil was born. This is one of my web page here. And so I started MedNet Brazil Concierge Services 2002. And all of my patients were like me. We were doing plastic surgery and weight loss surgery. So we were dealing with high risk, complication prone patients. We were doing 2 and sometimes 3 rounds of surgery in a 4 to 6 week stay. So we really had to, and luckily I was working with a doctor that understood this, but we really wanted to look at how do we get patients home on time, on budget, well healed, you know, not going over their budget especially was a big thing, and no infections, and making sure that when they got home that if they had any problems that their home doctor wouldn't have a problem following through with follow-up care and this kind of thing. So we worked very hard in creating processes and protocols. And every time something bad happened, because it always did, that became, some way of, okay, this is a pain point. How can we fix this so it doesn't happen again? And while I was there, I handheld about 300 patients through the process in the first 3 years of running it. And that's when I was actually living in Brazil. That's me in the middle, on the ground with my patients, a bunch of patients we had at one time in this little beach town in Brazil. And that led to some exposure back at the time. So this is before medical tourism really became medical tourism. Beauty from Afar, Patients Beyond Borders, and How to Plan a Successful Medical Tourism Trip. Eileen Little, I believe she's on the call, contributed. That's her book. I contributed to it. So let's see. So as a free market industry, I think I really drew on coming from outside of healthcare, if you will. Both of my parents are in healthcare, and I came up through the hospitality and hotel management. So I really was able to, as an outsider, look at a way to kind of innovate the healthcare experience. And I was a patient myself too. I was a patient in the United States, first for my weight loss surgery, and I had my own issues. I was home all alone. Literally the day I got out of the hospital, my husband worked offshore, and he went offshore for weeks. So I was literally all by myself with two little toddlers. They were like 1 and 3 at the time, and I had a drain coming out of me. I had all these stitches still and things like that, and so I had my own experience there first, and then in Brazil, same kind of thing. So I really feel like my experience as a patient in a couple of different countries, helped me kind of look at the whole medical experience differently. And since we're known as kind of a maverick thing coming in, it was a lot easier to innovate and not just say, okay, well, medical tourism or the medical procedure is all about just the procedure. It's not. It really started to understand we're selling an experience, that any kind of procedure you go through is an experience. It's not just the hospital stay and that you're doing the upfront part of researching and this kind of thing and trying to make decision where to go and everything else, and even locally this is important locally as well. Then you're in the hospital, then you're out of the hospital, then you're all by yourself, alone, or with somebody that's not a nurse, usually the husband or whatever it is, and what do you have to go through? You're nervous, you're scared, you're wondering if that's normal, if you should call the doctor's office, etc. So all this I was able to look at and say, oh, how can we do this better? I mean, the actual procedure itself is one thing, but there's a whole recovery period is really, really important, and that had more of an impact on me than the actual procedure. So let's see. So today, healthcare today now is starting to finally recognize this idea of a patient experience, the patient journey, the idea of care coordination, the ACOs and things like that came out with that. There's this concept now of chief experience officers, where they're supposed to humanize the patient experience, of course, within the hospital walls. Porter's value agenda for healthcare came in as well. This is when we started to hear about bundled pricing and value-based care, accountable care organizations, how we can create more collaboration between the different, this fragmented healthcare system. And I mean, there's already a lot of fragmentation in our own system, and you want to add the idea of medical tourism to that, you've got a whole bunch more fragmentation. So I always kind of feel like if medical tourism had been allowed to develop the way it was developing when I first started, before it became an industry around 2008, that all these words that said they're using, the bundle and the value-based and patient experience and care coordination, we were doing all this in medical tourism a long time ago. So I'd like to think that it's really an example that all of healthcare should be able to follow. So yeah, so these are the pain points and things that we as medical tourism pioneers were helping to start to address. And so why the IMTCC? I want to touch on Dr. Vquist's presentation from I guess a few months ago. The pain points with medical tourism he mentions today. and why the IMTCC is there and how we can help with that. And again, it's just really all about patient services and providing a level of service that helps the patient through the entire experience rather than just the procedure. And if we talk about the patient experience, then that's why I think even here locally that the smaller doctors and independent doctors, they can use the same approach to build a really great brand and build a really great reputation. So Dr. Vequist is mentioning this idea of accreditation in medical tourism. Obviously, you get any new industry starting up and you want to know, well, what are the guidelines? What are the rules? How does it work? How should it work? Who's setting the rules, etc. So this idea that accreditation in medical tourism really doesn't mean very much right now. JCI, Joint Commission, they're doing hospitals and things like that, but we've really been growing the business as it was recognized as an industry in 2008. It's been promoted more as a price thing, and it's really been kind of sold as a commodity, of surgeries as commodity rather than a service. So accreditation right now is just dealing with one part of what I call the value chain. It's just dealing with the hospital stay and things like this. And for those of us that have some experience, as you know, as far as your patient experience goes, an optimal hospital stay does not mean you're having a good experience. It does not guarantee your outcome. It doesn't guarantee your safety or anything like that. So just because you have a great hospital experience doesn't mean your recovery and your outcomes are going to be any good. So that's why I feel that we need to look more, instead of accreditation, setting some guidelines and things like this to actually create success. So we actually create a brand. Right now, the brand of medical tourism is pretty poor, if you will. Our reputation is pretty poor. We're considered a rogue industry just because we don't have, I believe, any of these standards or best practices. One of the other things he mentioned is how people get a hold of, how do they find out about medical tourism or how to go abroad. So this role of what they call medical tourism facilitators, people like myself that connect patients to providers. And there's a lot of difference in what they do too. There's people like me that built their services while on the ground with their patients. That's a whole different skill set and a whole different role that we play than a lot of how medical tourism is developed now with these patient portals and these online things. They're working on what I call the top-down process, selling it, but they're really selling an experience that they have no control over once a patient steps off the plane. I would say 90% of the time you have that kind of a system, and the patient is left in the hands of the doctor basically to care for, and some do a really good job and some not so good, and there's really no recourse is not there if there's any problem. That's another thing he mentioned. If there is any problems, any situations, what are the legal recourses? And there really isn't. You really can't sue a doctor if something goes wrong. And so what we need to do is mitigate the risk and things like this. And that comes through best standards of care and spreading best practices. And that's what's missing in the industry so far. And then, of course, having real data where we get some real information on outcomes and what's working and benchmarking what, best practices, etc. So that's kind of why I started the IMTCC. I recognized all this as the industry started growing and things, and saw there was a clear need to come together as a profession. Right now, said medical tourism facilitators, and we just don't have a very good reputation. We're really been reduced since the industry became an industry, said in 2008. We've been reduced to sales agents, brokers. We're forced to work basically on commission for doctors. A lot of us over the years have built up, no-name doctors, international doctors, and once they start to gain an online reputation, you have a few good patients like that, then they want to go elsewhere, or they want to advertise somewhere else. So it's been really difficult for us to be recognized for what we actually are able to do. And so that's what I want the IMTCC to be, a professional association first for those of us really hand-holding patients through the process, both in the upfront, top-down, and bottom-up. There's a clear need for standards and best practices in the patient care processes. I built it as a bit of a hybrid between a Chamber of Commerce and a Better Business Bureau, so kind of creating a network where not only within our own industry we can connect and know that somebody does it the same way that you do it, and also Better Business Bureau, so there's some kind of level of recommendation, reputation growth, some kind of oversight and compliance. And the goal is to build trust, strengthen integrity, and make sure we're all actually providing value. When I switched from MedNet Brazil to the Chamber, I wanted to share what I'd learned. I thought I had extremely good outcomes, that these are high-risk complication-prone patients. And instead of these high complication rates you see in medical tourism, which can be as high as 25% or more, and these horror stories you see on TV, I just wasn't getting that. I had my patients were going home on time, on budget, well healed, looking great. And when I sat down to figure out, okay, what was giving me success, what gave my patients success, I rolled it down to three things: advocacy, aftercare, and accountability. Advocacy is for those of us in the United States, we probably know what patient advocacy is. It hasn't spread around the world yet, but that's another goal of the Chamber. But performing your services as a patient advocate, not only is it transparent, we're not using the commission model and kickback model, which obviously is illegal here in the United States and other countries as well, but it's a way to provide patients with ethical representation and empower them through education and support. So we're not telling them, oh, come to my doctor because I have some kind of financial tie there, but we're able to actually help the patient do research and be able to build this network that we can all use. So maybe I don't have somebody that's a cardiologist, but if there's somebody in the IMTCC network and we know it works the same way as all the rest of us, then we can feel confident in being able to collaborate and get the patient to the best provider. Aftercare, I've always felt is a missing link in minimizing complications, reducing costs and readmission, improving results, and guaranteeing optimal outcomes. Might be surprising, but surgical site infections and readmissions is, we spend billions of dollars every year just here in the United States on these kind of things, and a lot of them are something as simple as a surgical site infection. Very simple surgical site infection. Our rate here in the United States is 19.6%. So that's huge. And I didn't even have that in high-risk complication-prone patients. So this idea of aftercare is actually delivering that care and using a teach-back method. So it's not just giving a patient a piece of paper when they leave the hospital with, scribble on there about how to take care of themselves. It's actually assisting them with it. So my aftercare system included literally the nurse visiting them in their hotel room every day post-op, helping them with compression garments, not only cleaning the wounds for them, but showing them how to do it so when they did have to go home and do it themselves, they could continue and feel confident. This was just a game changer as far as what it did for my patients and for the success of the doctor as well. And third is accountability. And this is where some of the problems in medical tourism, if we're working on commissions and things like that, it's very, very hard to determine who we really work for. So the idea of accountability fosters trust, it helps collaboration and transparency in an otherwise fragmented and aloof system. So, think about it here, even locally, the doctor, as far as he's concerned, he just works in the surgery suite, and once you get home, if you move the wrong way and you pull out your drain, and it's not his fault. And this is where this fragmentation comes from. So this accountability, we have to look at care coordination. It's a big buzzword in here in healthcare now. We talk about care collaboration. We talk about creating a network, taking away those, that fragmentation that we have, and really looking at the entire patient journey. And this is what we've been able to do in medical tourism. So the mission of the Chamber is to instill integrity, standards, and trust to medical tourism and global healthcare services. As a professional association, we want to help educate, empower, and distinguish those professionals who are transforming the delivery of medical and surgical care, assuring every patient affordable access to safety, quality, and care through those three tenets: advocacy, aftercare, and accountability. Our objectives, again, very applicable to any doctor, any healthcare provider, anywhere. Benchmark best standards of practice in a patient-centered care delivery system. Denounce substandard industry practices, behaviors, and performances. Sure, if you're familiar with medical tourism, a lot of that goes on. And there's really not been any organization yet to decide or declare, what these standards should be, and not only what they should be, but what they look like. So we want to be able to provide industry professionals training and mentoring on the IMTCC model, and sharing the workflows and the processes and the system, very much kind of like a franchise system. So what worked, like I said, for high-risk, complication-prone patients, getting down into the single digits for complication rates, if you can use the same model on high-risk patients, and you use it on a normal patient, then obviously you're going to have, great outcomes. So this idea of what really works, so more, not just information, but an actual system, proven over many, many, many years. We want to champion the adoption of new professional titles and a code of conduct based on the professional patient advocacy here in the United States and transparent patient representation. So again, getting the idea of us being sales agents or surgery brokers out of this, and adopting the idea of patient advocacy, where we're actually taking on the patient to represent his best interest, helping them do their research, and helping them make the decision, but not based anymore on what doctors were hooked up with or something like that. So getting that commission and contract idea out of it. Also, especially for those that are on the ground with their patients, is this focus on humanizing and customizing the patient experience to optimize recovery, improve results, and deliver satisfaction. Again, if we're there on the ground, we realize that it's not just the hospital experience. They're in the hospital for, a day or two, and then they're all alone in a hotel room somewhere. And same thing goes at home. You're in the hospital for a day or two, and then you're home all by yourself, with kids running around and laundry to do and this kind of thing. And nobody there is a nurse. Nobody knows how to care for your wounds. Nobody's there to answer your questions. You don't want to call the doctor all the time. So being this experience management in a way is a much better route to take. We also want to provide a software service platform to the entire network that enables quality reporting, consistency of processes and protocols, record keeping, performance management, etc. We also want to provide education and unbiased advice to patients, to patient consumers, and actually real data on the market. Right now, there's no real data on the market. Everybody is self-reporting. You hear a lot of people say that a lot of countries and regions want into medical tourism because a medical tourism patient is a lot more valuable than a regular tourist. We spend more money, they're usually there longer, etc. So, what is the actual spend on a medical tourism patient? What are the real outcome and satisfaction? What are the real complication rates? So this idea of having a platform where all that information is, not only can we spread the model and make sure it's consistent for everybody, but this same platform helps us look at all those pain points and be able to evaluate what's working and what's not, to innovate and improvise, so we end up with good outcomes and high customer service, and reducing hidden costs and readmissions, etc. We want to facilitate and encourage transparent collaboration and accountability between the IMTCC network members. So again, the model that we're using in medical tourism has forced us to become competition rather than collaborating, because if we're only able to send patients, if we're only working on commission, that means we can only send patients to whatever doctor we've got an agreement with that, you send me a patient and I'll, pay you a commission on that. So this doesn't work. So right now, if I say, okay, I have a patient that liked what I've done for them before, now they're calling me on, I don't know, a cardiology procedure or something like that they need. I don't have anybody in my network that does cardiology. And because everybody's working on commission, it's really hard to be able to first trust somebody, where can they go, but also make sure that you're compensated. So this idea of becoming an advocate for the patient, the patient contracts you and pays you to help them find the right, option, whether it's locally or across a country or across just a state border. So we also want to expand the model and the brand of the IMTCC care system through an international network of regional concierge desks, and promote the three tenets: advocacy, aftercare, and accountability, really as the catalyst for change in healthcare delivery. And it's all about putting care back in healthcare, not letting it become so fragmented, really taking advantage of the patient needing help and delivering a service value model, if you will, that takes into consideration their entire experience, not just what happens in the hospital. So that's pretty much all I have to say to kind of give a background here, but that I do want to bring this up, that really it's a way of delivering healthcare differently, putting care back in healthcare, and creating this idea of care coordination and collaboration. And I said it's hard enough here locally. When you think of doing it on a market, on an international basis, it's that much more difficult. But when people look abroad for care, especially cash-paying patients, they want value, and really what's in value is not just price. It's what I call bang for the buck. It's what you really get for the money. So quick example, I had patients that I was quoting, for their whole total body reconstruction, basically, and they'd get a price quote of $30,000, and they were going to come back to me and say, well, I can pay for $30,000 here in the United States, and it's about bang for the buck. So when I sat down and explained to the patient, okay, for $30,000 in the United States, you're going to get, if you're lucky, an overnight stay in the hospital. Usually you're out the same day, and you're home all by yourself, and you have one procedure done. Here in Brazil, you're paying $30,000. You're staying for 3 weeks. You're going to have a nurse accompany you every single day. You're going to have lymphatic massage. You're going to have all your medications paid for. You won't have to think about anything but recovery and this kind of thing. And just won't have to think about anything, and it's a lot less stress and all this other thing. So it's this idea about bang for the buck in medical tourism. And I think just as cash enables us to be able to negotiate better, who doesn't like cash, right? I believe that this model is something really that can help all of healthcare. So I'll be quiet now. You want to take back the screen?
No, that's fine. You can let it sit there for a minute. So, Christina, that was quite good. And what you're really showing is that, being able to pay cash and also having more capabilities to travel and whatnot, it also allows you to get exposed to other options.
Yes.
Because when you're boxed into situations where you've bought, say, a health insurance, which has limiting, PPO networks and all kinds of restrictions being in or out of network, the cash patient is really autonomous to do anything and go anywhere and do whatever they wish. And so what's nice to see what you've done is, it's developed, it's gelled, it's becoming an industry, and now that it's getting a chamber around it, you're kind of reaching some higher levels of maturation. But when you were first getting started, how was it you were even finding doctors? I mean, to me, it seemed like it didn't even really exist. So how did you start to sense this and piece this together to begin this little journey? And then I want to switch over to some hands that we've got raised here.
Well, I started, so when I found a doctor in Brazil, it really was word of mouth. When I started the plastic surgery anyways, asking my Brazilian friends around, oh, who's a good surgeon and this kind of thing. And after a while, after that, I obviously was happy with what he did for me, but it's really a matter of being able to create a relationship with that doctor. And this is a kind of sometimes a hard thing to do in medical tourism, and especially for patients. with us as the intermediary, we have certain standards and we know how we need to operate with that doctor. That's why I brought up earlier this idea of creating relationships. It's much easier to create accountability and trust on a one-to-one basis. So I don't want to just go to a hospital because it's Mayo Clinic. I mean, really, that's great, but I like them all. I expect them to, they're the infrastructure basically, they're not the actual care. The point of service is at the actual care, and that happens between the doctor and the patient and, the advocate or whoever there is in the middle. So finding doctors is important, and we do have to know what to look for, and they have to be willing to be held accountable. I've had doctors that, you just can't work with them after a while. They're either, they don't want to take responsibility for certain things, or they're just not being transparent, or they want to take advantage of the fact that, oh, these patients are coming from the United States, so hey, this procedure costs $20,000 in the United States, so I'm going to charge 15. I'm like, no. What do you charge here? Exactly where you're located, So yeah, there's a lot of pitfalls to be concerned about, and that's another reason where hopefully medical tourism has evolved to the point where, not just me, a lot of us now have evolved and gotten to the point where, we understand that we have to have some guidelines, we have to have some regulations, we have to have some rules, and especially if we want to be able to grow this as, really a quality healthcare system. And I think medical tourism has a lot more to offer than local care, for sure.
Very much so. And again, like you said, also to bring that transparency, so those kind of players you described come to light and get discarded. Yeah. So they're going to end up out of business, or dealing in back alleys, or they're going to join the ranks of the quality caregivers. So it's perfect.
Right. Absolutely.
Kathy, I see your hands up. Kathy, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I just had to unmute myself.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Christina. Now you're talking about mainly hospitals, but I actually work for a doctor who's an orthopedic surgeon, and he has his own surgery center, which has done actual medical tourism. He's done hip surgery on a patient from Kenya or Canada. He has almost no infection rate, and so would being part of this chamber be a benefit to him because he's already got the standards going in. He has a website with transparent pricing, much like Surgery Center of Oklahoma.
That's a very good point, Kathy. And yes, I said we're starting with medical tourism because we're kind of considered this rogue, we're really not though, but we're considered rogue. And we're also based, a lot of us doing this, we have that service mentality rather than the medical mentality. So absolutely, and that's why I said in the beginning too, we can't build a relationship with a hospital. This is really comes down to that point of service. So we want doctors on board. And that's one thing, like you mentioned, the Oklahoma Surgery Center. This is slowly creeping into to our own system here. We talk about bundled pricing and package rates and things like that. This is something that's great for medical tourism because we want to know exactly what we're going to pay, and we want to know that, or feel comfortable that, okay, if I'm going here to save money, I don't want to get, nickeled and dimed as I'm leaving, and the hospital says, oh, it's an extra $5,000 because, this idea of creating like the Oklahoma Surgery Center, and there's lots of other doctors like yours, that are kind of looking, again, that's what we do in medical tourism. That's why it's really cool to see this spreading locally too. And yes, absolutely. There's lots of patients that want to come to the United States from other locations in the Middle East, anybody usually on the higher end of the income scale, but a lot of patients want to come to the United States and want to pay cash and things like this because we have such a good reputation. So absolutely, I'd love to talk to you or him afterwards and definitely get you on there for sure.
Great. Well, we'll certainly arrange that. I think I saw Gary. Did you have your hand up?
No.
Oh, you did not. Okay. Charles, did I see your hand up?
Yes, and thank you. And Christina, fantastic presentation. So walk me through a role play here. So, COVID and governments shutting down economies is making families and small businesses look at their budgets, and health insurance is so expensive, so they're looking frankly to Jeff and my company, featured by Forbes, to cut that insurance cost in half. And of course, we make you into a cash shopping patient because we don't handcuff you with networks. So we do have a second opinion service for elective surgeries, and certainly these high-level doctors will approve necessary surgeries, and as long as the foreign bill is in English and US dollars, it'll be shared in the community. So I know you. I have families, a small business owner, clients across the country. We're going to connect you with my clients, get some advice on not only saving money overseas, but say finding quality. So take me through a conversation. So we've got the okay from the sharing company. Now we're going to look for some quality options in tourism. So what are you going to ask me first?
You mean as an employer, you mean?
No, I'm calling you for tourism advice. I want to use you as a chamber representative. Start me on my thinking process for tourism options overseas.
Well, it depends first on, what procedures you need for one. But, I mean, so walking a patient through the process, obviously there's an intake process, talking to the patient, seeing what they need. If they've already gotten, like you mentioned, a second opinion or first opinions from somewhere else, locally probably, sharing any kind of health history, any kind of records or labs or x-rays or anything like that, any kind of diagnostic tools. Then budget, I think, is an important consideration for cash patients, obviously. And then we go into, to me, it's kind of secondary, but a lot of people say, well, where do you want to go? And of course, tourism's in the phrase, but it's really, I really don't advise mixing tourism and travel, especially if you're undergoing any kind of surgical procedures. But some people have a preference to where they go, whether it's they don't want to travel more than a few hours on a plane, or they want to stay within a culture that's familiar with them, or they've always wanted to see India, whatever it is. So kind of get an idea on that sense. And then we would send the information to the specialists in the network that we had that dealt with the procedure that the patient needed. Then we create a treatment plan for the patient. That comes back with, that's kind of created in concert with the doctor about which procedure they're recommending, what kind of technique they're recommending, all the information on how long they need to stay, what to expect, what kind of aftercare they'll need, any other medications. This is where we get into creating a real budget, and that's one thing that we're able to do if we teach with the IMTCC model, is this idea of limiting the hidden costs. So it's great for people that are using this kind of plan, because we really, if we're doing it right and we have experience doing this, then we should know pretty much 90% of our patients, this is the average cost that they have. Exceptions always, somebody ends up in ICU or something like that, but being able to really get down and make sure it's really packaged, they're getting everything that they need in a certain price, and they're understanding what they're getting there too. A lot of patients want to bring a support person when they go medical tourism, and I saw so much of this early on. I said, when I was looking at Costa Rica and things, so many patients bring a support person. I only saw the support person create more problems. Usually, unless it's your mom or a nurse, don't bother bringing a support person. It creates a lot of problems. The support person, that patient ends up paying the support person's way. They pay their hotel. The support person finds themselves in a new country, and they actually want to do some exploring, while the patient's got these expectations of, well, you're supposed to be here helping me, things like this. So that money that they normally pour into a support person can go into ground services that they actually need in the destination to optimize their stay, aftercare, and transportation, and so they don't have to worry about anything. So treatment plan, And then discussing with the patient again, what sounds like the best option. Some doctors are going to provide different techniques, different approaches. Some doctors are going to say no. Some doctors have more experience than others in one thing or another. So really being able to look at it objectively and helping the patient make the decision of where they're going to get the best value, where they're going to feel they're going to have the most support and feel safe and um, have a really good recovery and easy return and everything else, best follow-up. Um, and then we get into, booking the patient's hotel. This is where the idea of the concierge desk I brought up comes in. It's so I might be here in Arizona helping a patient in Arizona that ends up needing to go to Mexico, but with the regional concierge desk, there's an IMTCC person, concierge desk on the ground over there that when we start already planning for their arrival and their procedures and everything, I'm already working with that person on the ground that I call a GPAL, a patient advocate liaison, that's going to be able to take over hand-holding that patient once they arrive, so from arrival to departure. So this idea of, not just handing the patient off to a doctor, but handing them off to another advocate that's going to, oversee that entire experience and all that chain, from whether it's dealing with the hotel, putting them in a noisy location, or to the pharmacy, restaurants, or transportation back and forth to the doctor. So really having that hand-holding process continue. And when they come back, then, the advocate on this side, myself, for example, is here to continue, be that liaison between the patient's PCP, continue with follow-up, continue if there's any more therapies or things that they need on the way home, being able, when they come back home, to be able to provide that. So it's really, like you're saying, a whole hand-holding experience, but it's very much transparency and, looking at all the value you can possibly provide for, for a certain price. So it's, that I think has given my patients, again, that's been my success, given my patients the most peace of mind, knowing that, they know exactly what they're going to spend already, and they know they're going to have all the care that they need. They don't have to worry about, well, should I spend more money to get more care? The idea of the brand of the IMTCC is to know that no matter where you go, like a hotel in a way, Four Seasons, wherever you go, Four Seasons, you're going to have a certain experience. Same thing with the chamber, being able to promise everybody very consistent and similar um, services and support no matter where they go.
Sounds really good, Christina. I'd like to see if I can maybe get that medical tourism action at my house on the weekend. Sounds fantastic. We got time for one last question, unfortunately, but I see David's got his hand up there.
Kathy, I assume that your Chamber of Commerce is nonprofit?
No, it's Christina. Not Kathy.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. No, we're not nonprofit at this time. Something I've considered, but I think the way that we have to work it right now, at least in the beginning stages here, is just to grow it, because we want to, promote the idea of using patient advocates as an actual service, and then providing services on the ground that are all paid for. So I didn't feel at this point in time. We do have some plans for some philanthropy stuff and things like that, but right now, no, we're not.
Well, I'm fully supportive of your direction on that.
Great.
We know that government trust building agencies have been a notorious failure.
Yes.
And so what I was hoping to hear what you answered and what you thought about competition in the private sector for free market, for-profit, trust-building rating agencies for the medical tourism market.
Yes, that is actually a big part of our platform. Like I mentioned earlier, everybody is self-reporting. There's no real numbers, blah, blah, blah. So this portal that we want to build, this platform, will, have the entire patient journey in like a checklist fashion, for every single part of every, from their intake all the way through the surgery, all the way through the nursing and recovery, and all the way home. So having this in one location. And what I think is a big problem right now, not only in medical tourism but healthcare in general, is you have patients that are rating doctors. No offense, I've been a patient myself, but being on the other side too, behind the scenes, patients don't really have the clinical expertise to rate a doctor properly. So one of the big things we're going to be doing is we're going to have a multi-source feedback. So it's not going to be just the patient giving feedback on the doctor, rating that doctor. But since I work very closely with the doctor, hand in hand with him while the patient's there on the ground, we have a relationship as well, and he has to relate. He has to create some interaction with me, and also this idea of multi-source feedback will be not only the patient grading the doctor, but also each of us that work with each of those doctors. So me as a patient advocate, I'm also going to grade that doctor with different things. How well did he respond to my text when I needed him? Did he answer, kind of thing? Did I get all the documentation from like surgical notes and things like this? So, there's different things that'll really help us be able to more roundly assess a doctor, but also gain our own. So I want that doctor to give feedback on me as well. Did I inform his patient properly? He didn't have to surprise the patient when he got there. Oh, she didn't tell you that you needed this or that. So this idea of having a multi-source feedback, I think, will be very powerful and really a more transparent way of creating reputations.
Excellent.
Certainly puts you in a good place when you're willing to subject yourself to that same scrutiny. So that really is quite good. Well, I have to tell you, this was very good. Now, we are recording this, as I indicated, and it'll be up this weekend on these channels. And we will be putting all the information about being in touch with you. Is there anything in particular that you would tell anybody right now as for anywhere to go look at what you're all about in the short term? And then when they come review this video, they can get all the rest of the details and the credits?
Yes. I'm sorry, I was reading the chat at the same time. The website, I can give you the website. It's www.imtcc.org. That stands for International Medical Tourism Chamber of Commerce, imtcc.org. So the one guy that asked me for nonprofit, no, but I do have an org. And it's really easy to look at. There's a place to click if you're a patient advocate, place to click if you're already involved in medical tourism, place to click if you're a doctor, etc., patient. So just go on there, and that'll come to me eventually, and I'll be happy to provide any information.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for being with us today. We'll definitely reconvene when the situation clears up and we get things rolling again. So it'll be clean to see how we get back on track together in that regard once again. But thanks again today.
Thank you, guys. My pleasure.